with regard to the U.S. economy right now, suddenly it's worse than it used to be. I haven't seen a good forecast any place now for a little while. Do you have a forecast for what you expect the economy to do this year and next?
Yeah, we do, but I would back up and say I think the piece that makes this hard to understand is you've had this tremendous concern, obviously, in the financial markets and feelings that nearly the chickens have fallen out of the sky in terms of liquidity capability. At the same time, you're still seeing industrial companies announce surprisingly good, I think to many people, earnings and sales growth. Our own case, all-time record third quarter, but our own forecast is that we're going to see global growth decline by 2 to 2.5% in virtually every region of the world as a result of this credit crisis, and the fact that none of us can be sure that with all the new mechanisms that have been put in place, that what the time for traction will be, because they are new. And so as a result, we think people need to be ready in not simply the financial markets, but in the broad global markets for a slower time period, with the expectation that by the second half of 2009, we'll start to see ourselves coming back from this.
Yeah. So internally in the corporation, how do you respond to this? You've got to do a lot of things if you think that that's what the future is actually going to look like. What have you been doing?
Well, the first is to have a point of view. And we think too often what you see is that when GDP changes, manufacturing always changes by a multiple of GDP. There's a higher beta on the manufacturing side than the service side. Often that's because there's an inventory overrun. And so the first thing we start with is what we think is a very realistic view of the economy. That's what I just mentioned to you. Within that, then, we're asking our teams really to be managing within that. And Eaton has already this year reduced employment in anticipation of this. We've had to close some facilities. We've had to downsize some programs. We think we're very much right-sized going into what will be a weak time period. The danger on the manufacturing side is that people don't call this early enough. They pile up inventories, and then they get a 2-for-1 reduction opportunity as they work through that more weak time.
Right. That does seem to be the pattern eternally, that people underestimate the severity of what's going to happen rather than overestimating it, which is usually a better course. Right.
And we think this time period is more akin to what we saw in 1980-81, when you saw a fairly deep and sudden, but then there was a fairly sharp snapback on the manufacturing side of the economy. I think too many people, we believe, are looking at the 90-91 and saying, well, gee, that wasn't as deep. But we saw nowhere near the liquidity lockup that we've seen at this time. And so that's what we're all, I think, trying to calibrate. And on the other side, we've now got enormous stimulation in the system. And not only in terms of fiscal and monetary actions, but also in terms of fuel prices having dropped in half. And so a little difficult to forecast when we come out the back end, how supercharged will this economy be, and what will the role of lower leverage also be in mitigating that. So the monetary agencies and regulatory agencies have got a very difficult knife blade to watch here in terms of stimulation and concern about inflation coming out the backside.